Okay, good evening, Rabotai. We're starting again Parashat Terumah. The Parashat Terumah start like this: וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ויקחו לי תרומה מאת כל איש, אשר ידבנו ליבו, תיקחו את תרומתי.
Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and let them take for me a portion. From every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion.
Okay. Before we start with the Parsha, I would like to connect the previous Parsha, Parashat Mishpatim, to our Parsha. How come that Parashat Terumah comes straight after Parashat Mishpatim? Our sages tell us that it's come to teach us something very important. The same like in the previous Parshiyot that we learned about the mitzvot ben Adam lachavero, that means the mitzvot that between a man and his fellow friends, that one of the mitzvot was that the person not allowed to steal, not allowed to hijack, ligzol. It's come to teach us also that you cannot do a mitzvah ba be'avera. That means a mitzvah that the source for us come from avera. That means that you're not allowed to steal money and then give that kind of a money and make with that a charity. So the main reason that Parashat Terumah comes straight after Parashat Mishpatim, our sages tell us that's one of the reasons to teach us that you cannot take money that it's not kosher and do with that tzedakah. So, בעזרת השם, נעשה ונצליח, והשם עלינו ברחמיו ירוויח. We're going to start, ויקחו לי תרומה. רש"י הקדוש say, לי לשמי. What it means, לי לשמי? For me, for my own name. What did Rashi try to teach us here? So the Malbim say, who was the Malbim before? The Malbim was Rabbi Meir Libush ben Yehiel Michal Weiser. And he born 205 years ago in Ukraine. And he said that when a person do a tzedakah or give a tzedakah or do any kind of maaseh chesed, that means a kindness, okay, he should do it only for the sake of heaven. What it means for the sake of heaven? When you give tzedakah, obviously it's for the sake of heaven. No. The Malbim said that there's many times people give a tzedakah, give a big donation. And why is he doing it? For his own name, for his own yichus, that people will see who he is, sometimes even to gain a power, that he can say, I have the money. Ba'ala me'ah u ba'ala de'ah, a person that have the money, he's in control. The Torah come and tell us that vayikhu li terumah, the Malbim say, that when you give a tzedakah, what it means, vayikhu li, that you should do it, and baseter. Baseter, it means that no one knows. And that's the higher level of netinat tzedakah, of giving a tzedakah. So our sage explained that what it means the highest level of giving tzedakah. So it said that when a person wants to give a tzedakah, he should give it to those that in charge. By that he give it to those that in charge, he doesn't know where's the tzedakah going, and those that receive the tzedakah doesn't know who they receive it from. So the Malbim say when the Torah tells us vayikhu li terumah, what it means vayikhu li terumah, that when you give the terumah, give it to someone else to pass it on. That's the higher level. By that, you don't know who you're given, and the receiver doesn't know who you receive it from. That's the higher level. Although the Gaon Hida, who was the Gaon Hida? The Gaon Hida was Rabbi Haim Yosef David Azulai. He born in Jerusalem 290 years ago. He was a student of Rabbi Haim ben Atar or Chaim HaKadosh, and he says something different. He said that when a person, the Torah tells us when a person has to bring a tzedakah, how he should give it. But he explained also that here, what it means, vayikhu li, and they should take me. The Torah tells us, and they should take me a portion. HaKadosh Baruch Hu come and say that he also want to be amongst those that going to give a tzedakah. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually say in a parsha that he want to be amongst those to give also a donation. What it mean a donation? And which donation did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say that he brought? Our sages tell us that which donation HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought. He brought the Avnei HaShoam, the stone of the Shoam. And not only that, Avnei HaShoam ve'Avnei HaMiluim. What it mean Avnei HaMiluim? Those are the stone that they put when they cast the ephod and the hoshen, the breastplate, that to put the stone was special stone that they position them when they cast the gold, that they can put later on the proper 12 different stone that was on each one of them. So it's come to tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent the Avnei HaShoam and the other stone to position there later on the different stone that will be, he brought them. Our sages tell how did he brought them? That the Ananim brought them. What it mean Ananim? That's the cloud. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent it from the cloud. So from here it says Vayikhu Terumah. What it mean Vayikhu? We see that the highest level that when a person has to give it tzedakah to do it l'shem shamayim, number one. Number two, when he do it, preferably to do it without no one knowing that he done it. And number three, that the Torah come to teach us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself was among those to give the tzedakot. So from here we teach us how important is it, the Torah come and teach us, is to give a tzedakah and the way that we should give the tzedakah. We'll go to chapter 25, verse 8. And verse 8, the Torah come and tell us something very interesting. ועשו לי משכן, ועשו לי מקדש ושכנתי בתוכם.
They shall make a sanctuary for me, so that I may dwell among them.
The Torah come and tell us that we should make a sanctuary, that the Almighty can dwell among us. What does it mean? What does it mean, a sanctuary? So there is few different explanation what it means a sanctuary. Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh HaKadosh. Al-Sheikh HaKadosh lived in a time of the Marana Bet Yosef, the time of Ari HaKadosh. He lived in Tzfat. We're talking about almost 500 years ago. And he wrote a commentary about the Torah. And he says something very interesting. And he said like this. He said that every person, every Jewish person should make a mikdash, should make his heart as a sanctuary. What does it mean? That inside his heart should be as holy as he wants to go to pray. If a person want to go and pray in a shul, if a person want to go and pray in the Mishkan, he want to have a holy place. He should make his heart as holy as he wants those places to be. That means that he should keep his heart clean from hatred, not to hate anybody, to love everyone, to try to bring everyone together, to make peace between a man and his fellow friend, not to talk lashon hara. That's called a sanctuary in your heart. The Malbin says something very interesting. The Malbin say that the Mikdash that we're talking about, what it means Mikdash, that in every generation should be a Mikdash that each one of us can go and pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean? That in every generation we should make a place to be so holy that we can go and daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not only daven, to feel comfortable to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? The rabbi from Amishinov said completely different else. He said that what it means, and you should make for me a sanctuary, he said that every person should make his house as holy and as that full of tahara and kedusha. That means that this place should be so pure and so holy that his house can be exactly like a Bet HaMikdash. So he explained, how do you do that? So our sages explain that how does a person keep his house holy and pure? By that he keep Taharat HaMishpaha. Not only that he keep kashrut inside the house, that he speak divrei Torah in the house, he give a shiurim to make sure that his house is holy. Not only that the way that they behave in the house should be very holy. We're going to move on to chapter 25, verse 10. And here the Torah speaking about the ark. The Torah tells us that we should make an ark. I'm just going to reach there. And it says like this. ועשו לי ארון עצי שיטים, 2.5 אורכו, ו1.5 רוחבו, ו1.5 קומתו.
They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height.
Okay. The Torah here commands us to make an ark, and it tells us from what kind of a tree it has to be. It has to be an acacia tree, and then he gives us the measurement. So the measurement, if we look, they are not full measurement. It says like this: 2.5 אורכו, and then 1.5 רוחבו, and 1.5 קומתו. The Torah here comes to teach us very important thing. But the first question that we should ask ourselves, the Jewish people was in a wondrous Bamidbar, and that's a very famous question that everyone asks. If they're in a desert, where can you find in a desert a acacia tree? So the Midrash Tanhuma, who was the Midrash Tanhuma? Midrash Tanhuma, before I carry on, the Midrash Tanhuma have another name. The Midrash Yelamdenu Rabenu. That means that our rabbi teach us. That's another name to Midrash Tanhuma. Who was the Midrash Tanhuma? The Midrash Tanhuma was after the Amorah, Rabbi Tanhuma bar Abba, the son of Abba. Rabbi Tanhuma, the son of Abba, he was Amorah in the land of Eretz Israel. And he wrote a commentary about the 5 books of Moses. And that commentary, he explained that where did they got the acacia tree? It tells us that those trees that we're talking about, when Yaakov Avinu gone down to Egypt to be with his son Yosef, he knew that after a certain amount of years, the Jewish people are going to go to slavery. And when they leave, they need the acacia tree. Therefore, he brought with him the seed and he planted in Egypt. And he told his kids, and it's passed on, that when they leave Egypt, they should take those kind of a tree, and with that they're going to build the Mishkan, with that they're going to build the ark. Not only that, from that they're going to do the table. That's one opinion of Rabbi Tanhuma. The other opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that he bring in his book in the Zohar, he said no. The stick that Yaakov Avinu took with him to Egypt, miracle happened that stick got so long that they cut it, and from that they make the ark, they make all the rest of the stuff. How come? That was a miracle, according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in his book in the Zohar. Rabbi Avraham Even Ezra bring a different opinion. He said, no, completely not. He said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu make a miracle, and while there was marching in the wonders, he created what we call a yar. Yar is, it's a good question. How do you describe a yar? Is not a jungle. Yar is a forest. He created a forest that the acacia tree was full of it. And that's where they gone, and they took the acacia tree, and with that they built the ark, they built the table, and they built the altar. That's how they built the Mishkan with that also. And he said that not only that, he doesn't agree with the opinion of Rabbi Tanhuma, the Midrash. He said that how can it be that the Egyptian will allow the Jewish people, Bnei Israel, when they left Mitzrayim, to take with them the Kesher tree. He doesn't agree with that. Although, there is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi. Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi, born 501 years ago, and it's not certain where he born. There is a few opinion where he born, although I'm not sure where he born, so I'd rather don't bring. And he said no. In one of his commentary on the Torah, he dafka touched that. Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi was a student of Marana Bet Yosef. Marana Bet Yosef, that's Rabbi Yosef Karo, and a student of Rabbi Yosef Taichak. And he said no, he doesn't agree with that opinion of the Even Ezra. He dafka agree with the opinion of Rabbi Tanhuma on his Midrash Tanhuma. And he said no, that the Jewish people, when they left Egypt, yes, they took with them the Kesher tree when they left. And when the Egyptian decide, they saw that they're taking and decide to ask him what you doing with that, they explained to him, listen, we're going for 3 days to the Wanderers. At night, it's very cold. We need to build tent. We need to cover ourselves from those winds. Therefore, they knew about it. Not only that, that during the day when they was resting, they created what we call a shelter. So they needed the Kesher tree. That's how Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi explained. And from here we see that he agreed dafka with the Midrash of Tanhuma. So from here we see actually 3 opinions where those Kesher tree come from. Okay. But it says ve'asuli. What it means ve'asuli? If you take the word ve'asuli, it's actually in plural, not in single. It's first plural and then it's single. So the first question, what can we learn from it? What is Hazal learn from here? We have to understand why did the Torah speak in plural? So from here, Hazal learn, number 1, come to teach us that every person amongst the Jewish people have a share in our Torah. If he's learned enough, he can write a commentary. Not only that, if not, he can study, have a share of the Torah. There is other opinion, and the other opinion explain that when it's in plural to teach us something very interesting. That when a person learns Torah, he should learn it with someone else, not by himself. And our sages bring analogy. The same like we want to sharpen a knife, how do we sharpen it? With another steel. When a person wants to sharpen his knowledge, to be more scholar, to know how to get to the halacha, to know the right thing, if you have to study with someone else. That's what it says, havruta. That means someone else, to study with someone else. As our sages tell us, hukne lecha haver. That means that you should make you a rabbi, aseh lecha rav, hukne lecha haver. That you should buy you a friend to study with him. What it means that you should study with him? That the person that study with someone else only can grow up. That's how the Mishnah and Masechet Avot explain. And that's what the Torah comes to tell us. Va'asuli in plural, that you should study always with someone else. Okay. Where we going to number 3. Later on, the Torah tell us on the same verse, the Torah tell us the size of the ark. 2.5 orko, 1.5 rohbo, 1.5 komato. We have to understand, if the Torah tell us that the measurement of the ark wasn't full, how come? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. So I'm going to bring 4 different opinions. The first opinion is of the Shach. The Shach, it's Arav Shabtai Kohen. Arav Shabtai Kohen, born 352 years ago in Poland. He was a posek, obviously. He wrote a commentary on the Torah, as we know, and he wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And it's well known that when you study Shulchan Aruch, you have to study Shach. So, the Shach says something very interesting. He said that from that we see that the measurement of the ark are not full, it's come to tell you something very interesting. It's come to teach you that when a person supports the Talmidei Chachamim that study, what does it mean? That what we call Issachar veZvulun. It means that there's people that are wealthy, and they support those Talmidei Chachamim. They share the Torah. They have a share for the Torah. That means whatever the students study, if he study well, obviously that guy that supported him gets as much of his Torah, and they can share it. The question becomes, if that's the case, the wife of the Talmid Chacham. So I would say, just tell us by that the woman allowed the Talmid Chacham to go and study. She shares his Torah also. She gets from here the benefit for Olam Haba. So from here it's come to teach us, when a woman sends her husband to Shi'ur Torah, that's her reward that she's getting in Olam Haba. The same Torah that he studied in a Shi'ur, that's what she'll get. Obviously that's if the husband study, not if he come and he chat. I don't want to say anything else. He sit on the side and you know what I'm talking about. Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim say completely different thing. Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim come and say from that we see that the Aron, that the ark wasn't full measurement. It's come to teach us that a person are obligated to work on his midot. What is midot? It's characteristic traits that a person should work on himself. For example, if a person knows that he's a jealous person, if a person knows that he's an arrogant person, people know if they're arrogant inside themselves. If a person is an angry person, or he loves to spend money, or he's a stingy, a person that cannot open his hand to give tzedakah. Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim come to teach us that from the Torah that the Torah tells us that the ark was broken measurement, you should also broke those kind of trade, characteristic trade, and change it. Work on yourself and try to bring the best of it. Change yourself and try to change your midot, to do only good deeds. There's other opinion that our sages tell us, that from here that we see that the measurement of the ark is broken, it's come to teach us that a person never can say to himself, listen, I study enough Torah. If a person said to himself that he study enough Torah, it's already a problem. Because in Aron Abri, that way was Luchot was, that way was the Torah. Come to tell you that whatever you study, you didn't even reach a half of what you're supposed to know. Because in the Torah there is Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod. So if you finish the Pshat, you still have the Remez. And if you finish the Remez, you still have the Drash. And if you finish the Drash, you still have to reach to the Sod. Who can say that he studied all of that? So our sages tell us as much that you think that you study, it's never enough. You only reach the half. You still have a long way to reach on study Torah. Rabbi Yitzhak Avraham, he was a sage in Bavel, and he says something very interesting. If you look carefully, how do we call a person that is a scholar? Talmid Chacham. Talmid is a student. It's come to tell you, as much that you study Torah, as much that you think that you're a scholar, you're still a student. From here, it's the Torah come to teach us. Say, Rabbi Yitzhak Avraham, that as much that you study Torah, you only know a half. That's what they call you Talmid Chacham. You're still a student. So from here we see, when we read that pasuk about the ark, what can we learn? Va'asu li Aaron, in plural. Why dafka in plural? And why the measurement of the Aaron always broken. We go to chapter 25, verse 18. And here the Torah speaks about the cherub. And we'll see what we can learn from the קרובים. ועשית שניים קרובים זהב, מקשה תעשה אותם משני קצוות הכפורת.
You shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Hammered out shall you make them, from both ends of the cover.
Okay, the Torah tells us how should we do the cherubs. The cherubs have to be made from gold, 1 cost of gold. The Mechilta, in the end of the last parsha in Parashat Mishpatim, tell us that the cherubs have to be done only from gold. No other kind of metal, no other kind of, I would say, no other kind of material, only gold. What is a Mechilta before we carry on? If we look at the Aramaic translation of the word Mechilta, it means a measure in Aramaic, a measure of something. So a Mechilta, it's a midrash halacha, it's a midrash of halacha about the book of Shmot. And that's what he said, that from that the Torah tells us that the cherub have to be made from gold, all the other vessel we can learn that doesn't obligate it to be other vessels, in a Mishkan, not obligated to be gold, but dafka the cherub. Rabbi Meir Shapira Miluvlin explained it differently. He born in northern Romania, in the north of Romania, 127 years ago. And he said that from that the Mechilta said that we obligated to do it only from gold, we can learn that is the other vessel, like I mentioned before, can be done from all different kind of steel or other material, obviously different material of steel. But we have to understand why is the cherub, our sages tell us that those cherub have a face of a young boy and a young girl. What is it? What does it come to teach us? So our sages explain, the Mefarshim explain, the Mefarshim, not our sages, that it's very important for us to understand one thing, that we have to give our children the best education that we can give, that when I say best education, I'm obviously referring to Yiddishkeit, that those kids will know the future. They know that they belong to the army of God, that they're part of the army of God, that they know that they're Jewish, that their identity is there, and they know how important is our Torah. So it's come to tell you the same like the cherub was on top of Aron HaBrit. What is Aron HaBrit? That where was the Luchot HaBrit, where was the Torah, that's what you should teach them. And how you should teach them? You should teach them step by step. You should build the identity that they know who they are. They know that, number one, that they're Jewish. What it means to be a Jewish. Jewish doesn't mean just to say, I'm Jewish. It means to know the Torah, to be proud that you are a religious person. So our sages come and tell us from that we see that the cherub was on top of the Aron Kodesh, teach us about the Chinuch Yeladim, the education of our kids. Rabbeinu Behaya say something very interesting. He said that the cherub have to stand straight, facing each other. Why? So Rabbeinu Behaya explained that the main reason is that as it's important, the mitzvah that Ben Adam Lamakom, that it's important that the mitzvot of between a man to his Almighty, it's as important the mitzvot Ben Adam Lahavero. That the mitzvot that between his man and his fellow friend, is as important like the mitzvot ben adam lamakom, between the man and Almighty. And that's why it's come to tell us why they're standing straight on top of the Aron HaBrit, that people should have respect one to each other, should have derech eretz one to his fellow friends, and not just in the front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Alshech HaKadosh come to teach us something completely different from that. He followed the way that our sages said that if you want to teach your kids, education, when you should start? You should start when the kids are young. What it means kids are young? Dafka in a young age. And that's why the cherub are young boy and young girls. From here you can learn that only when they're young you can educate them. And again, the Alshech HaKadosh said that you're obligated to educate them when they're young, but you should do it slowly. To build the identity, to understand what it means to be a real Jew, a proper Jew. We go to verse, also in chapter 25, verse 23. And verse 23, the Torah speaks about the table. And let's see how the Torah describes the table. The Torah tells us, and what can we learn from it? The Torah tells us, ועשית שולחן עצי שיטים, 200 אורכו, ואמה רוחבו, ואמה וחצי קומתו. The Torah tells us here that we see that the measurement of the table are full measurement. What can we learn from it? So our sages come and tell us that if the table, the measurement of the table are the full measurement, we should learn something very interesting. As the table is full, that when we bring visitors to our house, the table should be always going to be full. That means give your visitor the best. Not because he's a visitor, give him the second grade, Haz v'shalom. The opposite, give him the best. So when you're hosting a visitor on your table, give him the best food that you can. Don't give him what left from the day before. Other opinion that the sages bring, that when you study Torah, when you're davening, when you're doing a mitzvah, do it fully. The same like the table. What it means, the table? He said that when you're doing a mitzvah, don't do it halfway, half here, half there. The Torah explained to us the same like the table. The table represents a parnasa. We're going to bring now what the Zohar says about the parnasa. So it's come to tell you, when you dive into HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't do a half-half. Skip up word. Daven slowly. HaKadosh Baruch Hu not interesting about quantity. HaKadosh Baruch Hu interesting about the quality. So when you daven slow. Do a full davening. When you study slow. It's not important to finish all the Sas quick, or finish all the Hamisha Homshe Torah or the Mishnayot. Go step by steps until you understand. Do it fully, the same like the Midot of the Shulchan. The Zohar said that the table represents Parnasa. What does he mean by that? He said that when you sit on your table, number one, it's very important that on Shulchan Shabbat, now I'm referring to Shabbat, that from Shabbos evening, that means from Friday night till Motzei Shabbos, should be bread stay on a table. And the Zohar explained that the main reason for it, that if you leave a bread on a table during the day, during the evening, even if you're not eating, you should leave the bread on a table, the halot. It's a sgula that your money will never be short. That means that parnasato shel adam lo tehsar lo. That means that he'll never be short with his parnasa. From here we see that there is also a segula from that the measurement is full, that he always going to have, please God, enough parnasa. Okay, now we're going to move to chapter 27, verse 2. We're going to read now, the Torah going to speak about the altar. And let's read what the Torah tells us in verse 2, ועשית קרנותיו על ארבע פינותיו, ממנו תהיינה קרנותיו, וציפית אותו נחושת.
You shall make its horns on its four corners, from it shall be its horns shall be, and you shall cover it with copper.
Okay. So we have to understand that very important thing. If we look at all the other vessels that we spoke so far, all the vessels that we have that was in a Mishkan, they are been covered or plated by gold. The altar is the only one that been, if you look carefully at the Parsha, that been covered by copper. The question is why. So the Al-Sheikh HaKadosh, Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh, we're going to bring his commentary, and he explained like this. Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh said that first of all, to understand how's the altar been. The altar been built from a cashew tree, and inside the altar, they filled it up with earth, with sand. So from here we see that first it was wood, cashew wood. Inside they filled it up with sand, and then they covered the altar with copper. Why dafka copper and not gold? By the way, in Bet HaMikdash was Mizbech HaZahav, the altar that make from gold. But we're speaking now that while we in the wondrous, they have that Mizbech, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu command them to cover it with copper. We have to understand why. Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh say that as we know that the main reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu given us a command to build the altar, why dafka altar? Because when people do sin, that will forgive their sin when they bring the sacrifice on top of the altar, when they shecht it, and then they sacrifice it on top of the altar, that's to forgive their sin. What's the connection? We have to understand the coloring. The color of a copper is a color reddish. It's much reddish color. Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh said that when a person realizes that he done sin, he's first of all embarrassed. When you get embarrassed, you have to decide that you really done the wrong thing. And when you done the wrong thing, you have to bring it in the front of the Kohen to tell him what you done. So immediately you get embarrassed. Not only that, you lower yourself, and you become basically like nothing, like earth. HaKadosh Baruch Hu realized that and command us to do the same. The same like a person when he realized that he done something wrong, when he realized that he sinned, he come in the front of the Kohen, getting embarrassed, getting all red, his face turning red, that he have to tell him what he done. He's so embarrassed with what he done. But he have the guts to do that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm going to show a bit of a respect to you, to show you that even that you have the courage to do that. The Mizbeach will look exactly like you. Why? The color is red, the same like when a person get embarrassed. So his face turn red. Number two, that he lower himself. He realized that he made a mistake. And if you make a mistake, let's realize that he lower himself, that he basically saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please forgive me, I sinned, I done something wrong. So he throw his arrogancy away and he become humble. HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to show a bit of gratitude for those people that bring the sacrifice, to cover the altar with copper, to show gratitude for those people that done sin and willing to admit it and to bring the sacrifice. So from here we see why HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to cover the altar with copper. And here we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the derech eretz that we can see, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we sin to him, willing to forgive us, and not only that he's willing to forgive us, he's also have a feeling for us. So kal v'chomer, how much we, If HaKadosh Baruch Hu willing to forgive us, not only willing to forgive us, willing to understand our feeling, how much we should do when someone else done something wrong to us. How much we should be more forgiving, more loving, more understanding, to try to fit HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So from here we see again what we say at the beginning of the Parsha. Why is this Parsha connected to Parashat Mishpatim? To show us that as it's important, the mitzvot ben Adam lamakom, between the man and the Almighty, it's as important the mitzvot between a man and his fellow friends. May it please God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us the courage and the honor to always be amongst those that will forgive and love the rest of our fellow friends. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.